here we are. Thanks for joining us, everybody, whether you're here with us live or watching a recording later. This is Alex from the Penn Yan Public Library with another food demo that you can do right at home with Joan Martin, who is SNAP Ed educator at the Cornell Cooperative Extension, local to us here, Yates and Steuben County, right?
And Schuyler, Yates and Schuyler.
Sorry, I always get Schuyler and Steuben counties.
I do too, and I work there. I do too. Yeah.
No offense to either of those beautiful counties,
right?
But I'm partial to Yates, and I can tell it apart. Okay, but yeah, we're excited to have you here again, and we will turn it over to you to give us your presentation, and we'll see the food demo as we go along. Right?
That's correct. Yeah, we're going to look at a couple things first. First, Alex, how is the volume? Too soft, too high? Just want to make sure it's good for everyone. Seems
good for me. Is it okay for Jamie? Okay, she says.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay. All righty. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen. All righty. Okay. And tell me, do you see the first SNAP Ed slide on here?
Yes, I do.
Okay, then we are in business. All right, well, we're so glad to have everyone here today and for participating. And this is a joint project, and we'll thank the many agencies who are involved in this at the end. But the whole idea is to talk about healthy eating, make healthy food accessible for people in the community, and show you some ways to save time, save money, and eat healthy food all at the same time. So we're going to go over a couple of slides and then jump right to the demo because it illustrates a lot of the things we'll be talking about. So we're going to be making a vegetable beef skillet meal. And the nice thing about this recipe is that it's very versatile. It's using a lot of what you have at home, what you have access to, what might be available at the food pantry. So you can kind of use it as a basis for a lot of variations. It's makes quite a bit, so you can get leftovers, especially this time of year when it's hot out. You don't want to have to cook every night, and that's not being lazy, that's being efficient. So we'll talk about some ways to utilize the leftovers or things that you may have around the house to keep you going for a few meals, not just for one. So here's the question I'm going to put out there for our participants. What are your biggest challenges to eating healthy on a tight budget? Are they time? Are they money? What are some of the things that really make it difficult sometimes to get good healthy meals and not spend too much money?
For me, it's time. Time is a big one. How about you, Jamie? And if you're not sure, that's okay.
That's okay. Or maybe Jamie can put it in the chat too. Put it in the chat, absolutely. Alex, and you can access the chat.
Yep.
Yep.
Hey,
Jamie. We're having a little trouble with the volume there.
No worries.
Yeah.
I'll watch the chat just in case we get anything, but okay. You can.
All righty.
For me, it's the time thing. Maybe time. Got different ideas and different for everyone.
Right. And we have actually changed some of the marketing for SNAP Ed. The new logo is save time, save money, eat healthy. Mm-hmm. Time is the big factor for a lot of people.
Yeah, and so Jamie added in the chat, yep, that time also is a big thing too.
All right, so we'll kind of try to concentrate on some of the time saving tips that we have, as well as some of the healthy eating tips. So we're going to be spending a few minutes talking about shifts to healthier eating. And the kind of cool thing is that these shifts or changes in strategy, some people like the word strategies, not only do you eat more healthy, but the same techniques, the same tips can also help you save time and save money, which is kind of nice. You're doing one thing for your health, but it will also help your wallet and help with that time factor that we've been talking about. So we're going to start by looking at the My Plate, which you probably have seen. It's out there quite a bit. And this is kind of like a framework or model for healthy eating that is used by the USDA. And the SNAP-Ed program is based on principles around the My Plate. We'll go over some of those. And as you can see, half of the plate is fruit and vegetables. And that right there is a big challenge for people. Usually we think of a meal, we think of a big, maybe piece of steak or meat, maybe a side of bread or potato, and then maybe one little serving of vegetables, and maybe fruit for dessert if you're lucky. But we're trying to shift the whole context to focusing more on the plant-based foods and whole grains, and maybe having the meat portion be a little bit smaller. And what that does is it does save some prep time on buying and cooking meat. And also there are food safety concerns with raw meat. And also it saves a lot of money because, as you probably know, if you've been to the store recently, the price of meat, of ground beef in particular, has gone way, way up. So some of these things we'll be talking about to cut down on the amount of meat that you might eat also help save a little bit there. So we're going to look at each section of the My Plate very, very briefly and talk about some of these shifts or strategies. First is vary your protein routine. So instead of regular ground beef, you might want to get lean ground beef. It's a lot healthier. And a lot of people think, well, the lean is more expensive per pound, and it is, no question about that. But it's actually by buying the fattier cuts, even though they're less per pound, it's kind of a false economy because when you cook it, you do want to drain off all that fat. You don't want that fat. So why pay for it in the first place? Your price per pound reflects all of the fat and all of the meat in the package. So by starting with lean, you're not going to get a lot of fat coming off of it when you cook it. So you're not throwing money out. Also, chicken or ground turkey can be less expensive. You do want to remove the skin. We are recommending that people eat more fish. And again, fish isn't the cheapest thing in the world, but you can use things like canned tuna, canned sardines, canned herring. They're all good for you. We do recommend that people eat more dried beans or canned beans, meat alternatives like tofu, which are interesting if you've never tried them before. And also things like peanut butter and nuts are good protein sources. Peanut butter, as you know, is relatively inexpensive. And so these are just some ideas there. For vegetables, our little mantra or saying is to vary your vegetables. And depending on the time of year and the season, you can use fresh, frozen, or canned. Of course, we want to push fresh vegetables. We live in an agricultural area, and we're really fortunate that we can get fresh vegetables at farm stands and farmers markets, but at certain parts of the year, winter, early spring, sometimes frozen and canned are a lot less expensive and also have a lot of nutrition still. Fresh vegetables that have been sitting on a truck for a week as they come up from California or Mexico, they've lost a lot of their freshness. So in many cases, the frozen vegetables, which are frozen or canned right after they leave the field, they actually have better nutrition. So you do want to go by season, you want to go by price. The main thing to keep in mind that if it's canned, try to get no salt or sugar added. It's not always possible, but when you can. And for frozen, the same thing. Don't get added sauces or seasonings because all they're doing is adding sugar and salt. And here again, the wallet, any seasoning or sauce that they add is adding cost. They can charge more money because they're adding something to it. So if you buy, say, frozen vegetables, just get plain frozen broccoli, none of the seasoning or sauce or any of that kind of stuff. And with the canned, or the canned in particular, if you can't get the no salt or no sugar, you can just drain it and rinse it. And that does remove some of the salt and sugar, which is a good technique. With fruits, we're saying focus on whole fruit, meaning to eat fruit itself, not necessarily fruit juice. If you do have fruit juice, you want it to be 100% fruit juice. They use words like fruit punch, fruit cocktail, fruit drink. Those all have added sugar in them, and we don't want those. We want the real thing, real 100% fruit juice. But really, even if it's juice, no more than one serving a day, because the juice doesn't have the added fiber and some of the other things that are in whole fruit, like if you have a whole apple or a whole orange, it's got stuff in it that's good for you that's not in the juice after it's squeezed out. And again, if it's summer and fresh fruit is available and it's at the farmer's market and it's cheap, you want to go for it. But again, in the winter, early spring, sometimes the frozen or canned are a better alternative. And again, if it is canned, drain it and rinse it, get rid of any extra salt or sugar. And again, don't get any added sauces or seasonings. So plain and fresh is best. If we're looking at grains on the My Plate, our saying or our mantra that we use is make half of your grains whole grains, which means eating things that have whole grain as the first ingredient. You want to look for things that have fiber in them on the nutrition label. And this can be really tricky. There's a lot of marketing that makes reading a label of, say, a bread or a cracker product kind of complicated. We could spend a whole session talking about that one day. But some of the things to look for are whole wheat or oats. Corn is a whole grain. Brown rice, which we're going to be using today. And even things like millet or quinoa, which cook up very, very quickly. There's a time saver right there. A lot of people aren't familiar with millet or quinoa, but they cook up a lot more quickly than rice. And so that's something you may want to give a try to sometime. When it comes to dairy, we do encourage very much low-fat dairy. We're in a dairy area. A lot of people in our area make their living with farming, but you do want it to be low-fat or skim. This includes milk, cheese, and yogurt. And yogurt, again, if it's low-fat, but it has a lot of added fruit, sometimes that means it's got a lot of sugar in it. So your best bet is to buy plain low-fat yogurt and add your own fruit. That way you're in control of what's going in there, especially the fruit on the bottom ones. They really have quite a lot of sugar in them. So it's much better to get the plain and add your own fruit and add as much as you want. Some people do have trouble digesting cow's milk. And so soy milk is also included in the dairy group. It doesn't have the lactose that causes stomach problems for some people. And like regular milk, it does have a good protein content. People very often ask about things like almond milk, rice milk, and they're fine. They're good. There's nothing bad in them, but they don't have the same protein content as soy milk. So if you're looking to have something that's a good substitute for regular milk, the soy milk has the same protein content. This is a list, and Jamie, we can get this list to you. This is a list of fruits and vegetables that tend to be low in cost year round. Includes things like apples, bananas, carrots, onions. I would disagree on the green pepper. They tend to be a little bit more expensive in the winter. Things like canned tomatoes, onions, celery. These are products that tend to be lower in cost, and these are what you can kind of use as your pantry staples. These can kind of be the backbone of your meal preparation. So if you have these things on hand, it becomes much faster and easier to put a meal together if you know you have these at home. Also included in this category, again, are the dried beans or canned beans, because they're quick, they're easy, they're a good protein source, no fat or cholesterol. So we do recommend that people start exploring the legumes or beans and start using those. And we'll talk about that with our recipe today. This is just what we were talking about, having a little bit less meat and maybe replacing some of the meat with some kind of beans. Again, you're getting protein, you're getting fiber. It doesn't have fat or cholesterol in it. And the main thing is it saves you a lot of money. I had a participant challenge me to use more dried beans a couple of weeks ago because I tend to go for the can. It's a lot faster. It's a time saver. But some of the smaller beans like lentils or white beans or the really small red beans, they cook up surprisingly quickly. I took this lady up on her challenge and did try making some at home. And they really don't take that long to cook, especially if you soak them overnight. The lentils can cook up, within 30 minutes or so. So they're a good alternative that can save you quite a bit of money. Again, we talked about buying things in season. For example, we're getting to the time of year where there are strawberries and they're delicious. They're reasonably priced this time of year. Whereas if you try to get strawberries in December, like you think, oh, this would be really nice for like a Christmas party or something, they're not going to be very good quality. They're not going to be very tasty, and they are going to be very, very expensive I had a recipe last week where it called for blueberries, but they're not quite in season yet. And they were a lot more expensive in the store than I was willing to pay. So you really do want to think in season as a way to save quite a bit of money and really get the freshest and best quality and best taste as well. We talked about farm stands. We're really fortunate to live in an area where there are a lot of farmers markets. You have the produce auction up in Penn Yan, you have farm stands, and there are also things called community supported agriculture where you buy a share and you get a certain amount of vegetables or fruit a week. And some places now even offer half shares or quarter shares for small families. And if you want any information about any of these, we can get you connected with the people in Penn Yan who can help with those. All righty. So what we're making today is a vegetable beef skillet meal. And the key words here are versatility and using what you have on hand. And Jamie, if you do go to the food bank, Alex, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're actually providing venison as an alternative too.
Well,
which is
so I have to correct you there since I had to do
okay.
the venue switch. We couldn't transfer the venison over, so it's
Okay.
our own protein of choice sort of situation at this point.
Okay, very good. All right, so we'll talk about what some of the choices are. The recipe does call for lean beef, and I did get the 90% lean, 10% fat beef. You can get ones that go down to even 70 or 85% lean. They have more fat in them. But again, you're just cooking that fat off and you want to throw it out. So I went with a little bit leaner, little bit more price per pound, but very little fat comes off. So you really are eating everything that you're paying for. So I went ahead and I browned this up. I'll show you what that looks like. And I already added some of the onions and got them going already. So let me bring my pot over and then later I'll shift the computer and we can look at the cooking part. But hold on one second. Okay, so is that fairly well focused?
Yep.
Okay, so here's, it's only a half a pound of ground beef. So again, we're saving money here by not using the full pound in the recipe. We're going to be adding other things to make a pretty large batch of vegetable and beef stew. But because we're only using a little bit of the meat, we're saving quite a bit of money. So I've already browned it well. I'm going to get rid of any pink. I've already added some of the onions and we're going to get the rest going. One thing I like to do, this isn't in the recipe, but whenever I'm browning meat or ground turkey, I add just a tablespoon or two of water to it because it makes it a little bit softer, makes the fibers a little bit less tough of meat. And I just think you get a better consistency that way. It's just a little trick. So I'm going to put this back on the stove. And we're going to chop up the rest of the onion. We still have to add a quarter cup of onion to it. We'll go a little bit over chopping technique. So I've used part of the onion already. The main thing for safe chopping is you want to put your flat side down. And I'm going to use half of this. Fingers out of the way. I'm holding my knife like so, very firmly. Some people with long fingers can do this, put their fingers out, and that gives them stability. My fingers aren't long enough for that. So I'm just holding it very carefully here. These fingers out of the way. Put that aside for the next time. And we'll get the rest of the onion in there and get it going. Stove on. So if you notice, I'm using this hand like a claw. I've got my fingertips back. So if I do hit anything, I'm going to hit my knuckle first. And I'm not going to cut my fingertips. So we'll just chop through and take the paper off. And the first layer, you usually have to remove the first layer of the onion. It tends to be kind of hard. And there goes some of it on the floor. Okay, we'll put that aside. We'll work with what we have. And I'm not throwing my scraps out in the garbage. I have a little container here, and this either goes in the compost heap or I put it in the freezer and it can be used to make soup stock, makes a really tasty soup stock. So not too much goes to waste, even of the part we don't eat. So now I'm going to cut it this way. Again, fingers out of the way. And then because the onion already has layers, it makes nice little small pieces on its own. Notice my fingertips are back. And then at the end, where you don't have enough to hold on to, just put it all down and start chopping away. Okay, so we're going to get these onions, the rest of the onions going with the rest of the meat. All right. Okay. And while that's getting going, we'll talk about the rest of the vegetables. Now, the recipe calls for adding the rice and the water at this point, but I'm using brown rice instead of white rice because it's got fiber in it. It's good for you. It does take longer to cook than white rice. So I have already pre-cooked the rice. I'm going to wait and add that at the end. But if you're using white rice, which only takes about 20 minutes, to cook, I'd be adding that now with the water. So to cook the rice, it's typically 2.5 cups of water to a cup of rice, 45 minutes for the brown rice, 40 to 45 minutes for the brown rice. So I've already got that cooked and set aside, and I'll show you that in a bit. So we're doing things a little bit differently than the order. I also have some carrots already chopped up. I don't usually peel carrots. Usually I like to leave the skins on, but these were a little bit old and a little bit gnarly looking, so I did peel these. And this is another little trick. I add the carrots in right with the onions, or sometimes even before, because if you brown the carrots, you get a really nice roasty taste. And you can do this for soups, stews, casseroles, really almost anything. So I tend to add the carrots early rather than late. So I'm going to throw them in right now with the onions and the ground beef. Okay. And we'll take a look and see what that looks like in just a second. Now the recipe is calling for 1.5 cups of vegetables. And these can be any vegetables you want. This is one of the nice things about this recipe is that you can use what you have on hand combined with what you got at the food pantry. So we're using corn, which I believe is in the meal kits, right, Alex?
That's right. Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to use 1/2 can of corn. Notice that it's the no salt added corn. I did drain it to get rid of the extra liquid, and it doesn't have the extra salt, which is great. So I'm going to use about 1/2 cup of that. I'm going to use also, a little bit surprisingly, a little bit of sweet potato because I had some on hand and I don't want it to go bad. So I chopped it very, very fine so that it would cook quickly. This is what it looks like in its original state. You do need to peel this. The peels, they're edible, but they're not very tasty. They're very, very tough. So you really do want to peel it. Chopped it really, really fine so it would cook up quickly. And then the other thing we're going to add is some green pepper and a little trick. These are all washed. Little trick for cleaning out your pepper is to cut it around the top like this. And then hopefully this will work. You just twist. Twist. Here we go. And then that will get rid of almost all the seeds. Green pepper, this time of year, the price isn't too bad, but in the winter, it can be pricey. It can be $2 or $3 a pound. So what I like to do with pepper is use it as an accent and for a little bit of flavor. So I'm only going to be using 1/2 of it and save the rest of it for another meal. So now that I have it like this, you can eat this fleshy part inside, but some people don't like it. So put that and all the seeds aside. So I'm taking out the fleshy part, cut it like that, and now I'm just going to cut it into strips. Cut them a little finer maybe. And then the top part that we twisted off is still good. The seeds are edible. You don't have to, but you can. But I think they don't really go with this meal, so we'll leave them out. All right. So I've got a 2-cup measure here. And so we're pretty close. Actually, we're a little bit over 1.5 cups. And again, part of what we're using is stuff we had on hand. The can would have come from the food pantry. So that's a nice way to do it. And plus I already have the carrots in there. So the other thing I also had on hand was a little bit of garlic. The recipe suggests that you use it as a possibility. So we're going to throw that in there too. The thing with garlic is you don't want to throw it in until you've got a little bit of liquid coming out of your other vegetables, or you've added some liquid, because when garlic burns, it smells terrible and it gets really, really bitter, and it can ruin the whole meal if it burns. So the garlic, we're going to add the other veggies and then the garlic. So I'm going to wash my hands, switch the computer around, and then we'll show you what this looks like in the pot. Okay. One thing I forgot to mention, there are 2 misconceptions about cooking. And you get a lot of this from YouTube, or you get a lot of this from shows, the cooking shows on television. You don't need a fancy kitchen to make really good, healthy, delicious meals. This is what I've got. I don't have a lot of room to work with. You don't need it. You can work with very basic things, and also with very, very basic supplies. A lot of the YouTube shows, a lot of the cooking shows, they're being paid by manufacturers to use very fancy, expensive equipment. And I think when we watch those shows, we get a little bit intimidated. So later I'll show you the basic kitchen equipment I use for 90% of what I make. And it's not much. So you don't have to be discouraged if you only have basic equipment. It's perfectly fine. All righty. So we're holding off on the rice, as we said, but now I'm going to add the canned tomatoes. Again, these are diced. And again, it's the no salt added. They're generally available in the store. And we're just going to plunk in the whole can. So here's what we have already. Make sure it's not too hot. This is the beef and the carrots and the onion. Now turn it on and plunk these in and give it a few minutes to cook. I'm going to combine this. So right now I have the beef, the onion, the carrot, and the tomato, the diced tomato. So we've got a little bit of liquid in there now, and I can throw the garlic in. I'll do that and get my other vegetables. And you don't have to add the carrots early. It's just a thing I like to do. You can add them in with the other vegetables. And then here go the rest. I could have even cut the pepper a little bit smaller. But, now this only takes probably about 5 minutes to heat up and cook. It smells really good. I wish you could smell this. It's got a nice, smell the pepper, smell the tomato. I'm going to turn it up just a little bit. I'm going to give that a couple of minutes before we add the rice. So let's talk about our seasonings. I'll switch you back over here. The recipe calls for, let's pepper stuff out of the way.
And you might want to move your screen down a little bit.
Okay.
There we go. Perfect.
There we go. Okay, thank you. Yeah. All right, so what the recipe calls for is chili powder, which is generally inexpensive. Most of the chili powders available in the store are quite mild. They're not very hot. So we're going to use, I think it's 1.5 teaspoons of this. Yes, it is. And then it also calls for oregano, which actually gives it a little bit of an Italian vibe by adding the oregano. And it calls for 1 tablespoon of oregano, which is actually quite a bit. So we're going to use those. I'll put those in a minute and let you see me doing that. I am also adding some cumin because to me, what is chili powder without cumin? Very common combination in Mexican cooking and South American cooking. And I happen to have this, so I figure why not use it? And usually the way I do it is about 1/3 as much cumin as chili powder. So if you're using 1 tablespoon of chili powder, you can use 1 teaspoon of cumin. It's a little bit stronger. So use a little bit less of this. So let me flip the camera back around again. We'll add these, and hopefully by then the vegetables will have had a chance to cook a little more. One of these days we'll have two cameras so that we don't have to switch around. Okay. You can see the pot on the stove there, right?
Yes.
Okay. So what I'm going to do, just get that a little bit better. There we go. I just want to make sure you can see. Better. Okay. Yeah, we're cooking up. It's starting to burble in there. Smells good. And I also want you to see all the different colors we've got so far, because part of eating, it's not only how it tastes and smells, it's how it looks. So we've got yellow, orange, green, brown, red. We're getting a rainbow in the pot, and that's what we want. The different colors of vegetables and fruits, actually the colors have health benefits. They contain things called phytochemicals. So say the purple in eggplants, the red in apples, the red in strawberries, the green in broccoli, they have beneficial effects for your health. So the brighter the colors, the better. We tell people to eat a rainbow because they're not only good for you, but they make the food much more appealing as well. One hint now, and add our seasonings. It's going to be 1.5 teaspoons of chili powder. One thing a lot of people do is they add the seasonings and put the container of the seasoning right over the pot. And you really don't want to do that. You want to be away from the pot because the heat and the steam coming out of the pot get into your container of spice. And it actually affects its freshness and it affects its shelf life. So I'm going to keep this away from the steam and the heat. Put it in the spoon and then add it from over here. So I'm not dunking directly into the pot and getting all that heat inside the rest of my spice container. So that was the chili, 1.5 teaspoons. So for the cumin, which is not in the recipe, but whoops, cumin, wrong one. We're going to want 1/2 teaspoon. So again, I'm pouring it not over the pot. Keep my container nice and fresh and dry. And that definitely gives it a very distinctive smell. A little bit more, the cumin. And then the last one, and I have to get my tablespoon measure, is the oregano, which I think is kind of an interesting spice to use in here, but it makes it good. It'll make it smell good. Like right now we're getting a Mexican smell, but this is going to give it a little bit of a different smell. Again, not right over the container, a tablespoon of oregano. Now you could use thyme, you could use Italian seasoning. There's all kinds of different things you could use. Okay, it's a little shy there. All right. Give it another stir. Okay, it's coming together nicely now. Now, if I was using the white rice, I would have cooked it for 20 minutes with the white rice and 1.5 cups of water. But because I did the rice separately, I'm going to add the rice now. The water is already in it. And as you can see, this is a lot of rice. So we just took 1/2 pound of meat, which isn't a whole lot, and we are going to make like 5 or 6 servings out of only 1/2 pound of meat by adding the rice and by all the vegetables that are already in there. And again, you wouldn't know it to look at it. It's hard to tell when it's cooked. This is brown rice, but when it cooks, it's hard to tell. It looks like white rice. I can sneak this by my family. They do not like whole wheat pasta. That has not been successful, but they will eat the brown rice. So, and again, we say make half your grains whole grains. And as you can see, this is going to make quite a bit. I'm really getting a lot of that nice green pepper smell, and it doesn't take a lot. Again, we only use half of the green pepper. but it's giving us a really nice aroma and flavor. So let's get that all mixed together. It's really pretty. The other alternative would be to put the rice in a bowl separately and then serve the vegetable beef mixture over it. You can do it that way too. Okay, I'm going to show you what this looks like. We've got to invent smell-a-zoom because we have the looks and the sounds. I don't know if you can hear it burbling, but you guys aren't getting the aroma, which is really nice.
Yeah, the smell is the best part. We'll have to work on that development.
Before I show this to you, I'm just going to look at my ingredient list. It's taped up here. Make sure you didn't miss anything. Okay, we have one more thing, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But everything that's going in now is in here. It is boiling a little bit. I don't know if you can see the bubbles.
A little bit.
Got lots of colors. I've got probably about 6 or 7 cups in here, and that was stretching only a ½ pound of ground beef. So what I'm going to do now is plate it up and let you see what it would look like as a meal. I hope it's good because my husband's going to be eating it for days. Okay. You could also do this in an electric skillet. You know, some people don't have really full cooking facilities. Say if they live in a small apartment, or some people might live in a camper situation. This would work very, very well in a plug-in electric skillet. And I'm going to bring it over here and switch the camera around. And one more ingredient to add. Okay, so there we go.
Looks beautiful.
So you've got vitamins and minerals from the fruit and vegetables and the tomato. You have fiber in the brown rice and the vegetables. You have nice lean protein in the lean ground beef. I've added an orange for some fruit. With a glass of low-fat milk, you'd have a complete meal. We're going to garnish it, and this is in the recipe, with a little bit of shredded cheese. And again, this provides a little bit of protein. And you just want to put that on a minute or two before you serve it and let that melt. And again, it's more like a garnish than, you know, a full serving of protein, but it gives it a little bit of creaminess, a little bit more flavor. And again, I'm using the part skim cheese, so it's a low-fat cheese, healthy. The least expensive thing of all would be to buy a block of cheese and shred it yourself. You actually can save quite a bit of money doing that. But again, we're talking save time here. And this is very, very quick. And I would say at least 3 or 4 nights a week, I'm using shredded cheese as a topping to make something just a little bit more tasty and appealing. So there we go. There's our vegetable beef skillet meal. We'll have to make the recipe available, Alex, either on the library website, or if Jamie provides her email, we can email that to her.
Oh, I've got it right in the food kit. So
you do. That's right.
We'll pick them up, we'll get it, but I can also share it any other way too. So I will.
Right. So how long did that take? Maybe 20, 25 minutes?
Yeah, not long at all.
Yeah, and I have enough here for at least 3 or 4 meals, if you consider suppers and lunches, at least 3 or 4 meals for 2 people. You could freeze half of it, and that way, you know, you've got meals for later on down the road. This was freezed very nicely. I would not add the cheese until you defrost it and reheat it, though. I would keep the cheese out of anything that you're gonna freeze. Excuse me. Okay, I'm gonna wash my hands.
Okay.
1 or 2 more real quick slides, and we'll pull back up.
Okay.
But again, man, this smells really good. I wish we could transfer that part of the experience. So,
So we'll have to make it ourselves, and then we'll
Yes, yeah. All right, let me just pull up my slides for just a second. Anything in the chat that I need to be aware of?
Nope, just clarified a couple things here and there about what was included in the kit, and Jamie sent their email address for me so that I can.
Great. All right.
Also.
So yeah, we'll send her this. Oh, I just lost it. Go the other way. There we go. We'll send this out too. It's a one-page handout. And fortunately, it's clearer than this slide. Unfortunately, this slide is not the best resolution. Let me get back into the slides. We talked about farm stands. All right, we did the demo. All right, so these were the slides I want to show. You don't need a fancy kitchen to make delicious, healthy meals. I have a very basic stove. I have a 3/4 size refrigerator, and I have about 3 square feet of counter space. I'm fine. I don't need any more than that. Cast iron skillet, a couple of pots and a tea kettle. You're in business. Again, we talked about having to have fancy stuff or fancy equipment to make delicious, healthy meals. Not true. What you see on the right are what I use about 90% of the time. A lot of the stuff I got came from thrift stores, came from yard sales. You can do it inexpensively. You don't need a 20-piece knife set. The 2 knives you see here are the ones that I use probably 95% of the time. Occasionally, I'll use a serrated knife to cut bread, but these 2 are my workhorses. And so I don't have a fancy knife stand, a fancy knife set. They'd sit in the drawer and collect dust, wouldn't use them. All right, there was our recipe that we just made. Unfortunately, on the website, foodhero.org, and this is a website we recommend, it shows it in a casserole dish. It's a skillet meal, so I didn't use that illustration. These are some of the recipe sources that we like to recommend to people. They have healthy, low-cost recipes. SnapEd New York, which is the SnapEd website, foodhero.org, which is where this recipe today came from. A couple of the others are My Plate Kitchen, Cooking Matters, and then this new one up in the right corner, Old Ways, is a recipe website that has a lot of cultural recipes, Latin American, African, a lot of really neat stuff on there. And we've just started using that one recently. So these are sites that we would recommend when you're looking for inspiration. There are programs in the area that can help you save money, including SNAP. There are your local food pantries, and we're working with them today. They've been having community food distributions. For seniors, there are senior meal sites, Meals on Wheels. Some churches offer community meals, and I believe that's the case, Alex and Pena. There are community meals.
Yes, there are a couple of different community meals. Yep.
Okay. Very often at no or nominal charge. There is the Senior Farmers Market Nutrition Program. And then also there are some gleaning programs where farmers will allow people to take anything that's left over at the end of the season, or they'll bring it to a local church and have it distributed there. We do want to thank the different agencies that have been involved in this project. Obviously, Alex and the library. Pro Action of Steuben and Yates and the Hope Center, which is where the meal kits were being distributed from. Cornell Cooperative Extension of both Yates and Schuyler County, and SnapEd New York, which is run through Cooperative Extension. And then some funding was also provided by the Living Well.
Yep. And just to add to that, just because of the unexpected change, the distribution site for this meal is the Living Well. So just to be clear for Jamie, for when she wants to go pick that up tomorrow. Yep.
Yeah. Took a lot of collaboration and a lot of cooperation, and it's really nice to work with partners who are trying to help folks out.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, here's my contact information if you need it. jdm458@cornell.edu. We are a equal opportunity provider, so we always display the And Justice for All poster. And also the My Benefits card, which can help you get SNAP benefits, see if you qualify. This card is available at the county office building. It's available at Cooperative Extension. You probably have them at the library too, right?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, so if you have this card and go to the website, it can help you figure out if you qualify for SNAP benefits. And if there are any questions about that, we can put you in touch with people who can help you work through that process. So I think we're all set. See if we have, I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay.
And see if we have any other questions at this point.
Don't see any yet, but Jamie, chime in if you have any. No need to, of course, if everything is all clear with you, that's great.
We do have a poll, Jamie, that
Yes.
we would, it's a survey that we would appreciate you filling out. They
That
are
is-
anonymous. Alex just put the link in the chat box. So if you click on that link, it'll take you to the survey. And again, no name, no personal information. It's just asking questions about different eating habits. And we really appreciate you joining us. What's that?
I said okay.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you for joining us today. We hope you get a chance to try the recipe and enjoy it.
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Jamie. And
Great.
so, of course, thank you so much, Joan, for walking us through that process and providing all the other information that you did.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye, Jamie.